My name is Dr. Kyle Stanley. I am a dentist, a tech entrepreneur, a speaker, and a researcher. And I love being on the forefront of what is happening in dentistry, whether that's from the clinical side, from the investment side, from the advisory side. I just love being on the forefront of this. Looks like we've got people from Oregon, we've got people from LA, we've got people from Philadelphia. So super cool. Today, I wanted to bring you a company that I've been involved with that I think is really on the forefront of what's happening in minimally invasive dentistry, in preventative dentistry, in really biomaterials and technology. So, I would love to just start out and have everybody introduce themselves, and we'll start with Stephen.
Hi, can you hear me okay, Kyle?
We can, yes.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for hosting this event and everything you do for us. Appreciate it. So my name is Stephen Bloembergen. I will be presenting today, and with me from GreenMark are Dr. Nathan Jones, who started all this in his Ph.D. research with what we think is a really disruptive technology, and also Dr. Arash Hakhamian, who is the CEO of Dentulu, our strategic partner, and also our chief dental officer for GreenMark.
Fantastic. And Steven is being a little, he's playing himself down. He also has his PhD and has been involved with biomaterials for 3 decades. So you're talking with people who really know their stuff with biomaterials and some new technology that's coming in to the dental world. So, Steven, let's start with the big problem that we have in dentistry, right? We have a lot of problems with caries and with sensitivity. And I know you have some of the data on that. Maybe you could share your screen and show me some of that.
Sure. Let me just start by saying, yeah, my passion is multifold. It's in not only skiing, as you can see behind me, but entrepreneurship and biomaterials. So my whole life, I've developed disruptive technology and scaled those up, and I have a real passion for that. And we've always prided ourselves of trying to work with the best people, so we learn from their expertise. I'm personally not a dentist, but we have a lot of dentists that really surround us to help guide us. So I think, as you all know, caries is the world's most prevalent chronic disease. So maybe I could just start by sharing this slide here. So we're really uh, thinking we can take dentistry into uh, a modern world by using a combination of biomimetics and targeted delivery. That's really at the core of our products. At GreenMark, uh, we're watching fondly as we see this debate around fluoride continuing, and it'll shake out over time. We are agnostic on this position, but we are pioneering a fluoride-free solution for preventive dental, for preventing dental decay. And really, the idea of providing a non-invasive treatment for early stage caries. So once you have a hole, it's too late. You have to fill it. You have to treat it. But for those who uh, really care about early detection and early prevention, we have the solutions. And for those who still prefer to use fluoride, we do that as well. And we have developed really low dose and more fluoride efficient products.
Well, I'm
So I think,
interested for
yeah,
you to, once you explain the science, I think that this topic is so prevalent right now. We're finally starting to realize that dentistry wants to be more preventative. In general, we've been, let's wait for the hole to happen and then let's fix it. Let's wait for the periodontal disease to happen and then let's fix it. And I really think we're moving towards this preventative type of treatment. And so I'm excited that this is what you're focused on.
yeah, cool. So let me maybe just jump to a slide here in the deck if it's working. There we go. It's not moving. Okay, here we go. Uh, just going to move it over here. Next slide. So, um, as I'm sure most of you on this call know, that in dentistry, everything relates to two main diseases. It's periodontal disease and dental caries. And one of the reasons that caries is the most prevalent chronic disease in the world is because early stage decay is almost always found too late. And that really started with Brian Clarkson, cariologist at University of Michigan, who was speaking with Nathan and our team about this. So all dental professionals know that a small shadow on the x-ray means that things are typically much more advanced. So this is an example of an article by Featherstone. This tooth was extracted, cut in half, into decay, stained, and that revealed that these tiny shadows in X-ray correspond to deep decay. And we all know X-ray works really well on the interproximal, not so much on the occlusal lesion, where 65% of lesions really develop and present themselves. FDA also takes the position that the disease starts when we have a hole. Whereas world experts and curiologists all know that it's at the early stages when we consume sugary foods and the bacteria start adapting, become more acidogenic. The ones that are more acidogenic are thriving, and that's really what the disease is, which can then, of course, really accelerate. And it depends on many factors. Of course, oral hygiene, it depends on genetic makeup. But this tooth was cut in half, and what this shows is that when they stain to decay, you can see that in the interproximal area where X-ray is supposed to work quite well, it's already into the dentin, and under the occlusal, it's all the way into the pulp. And X-ray has no way of telling whether this is actually actively progressing or arrested. So the conclusion that these guys, we know Featherstone quite well, is that we got to find these lesions while they're still enamel, well before cavities form, so they can be treated non-invasively. Now, maybe I say thanks to FDA, we got diverted in a whole other application. We've had multiple grants, and I hope you will see from today's discussion and presentation that we have really published in peer-reviewed journals, worked with some of the top dental schools, and we have robust science. Um, but FDA kind of pushed us into the sensitivity area, and that's because there are no FDA cleared treatments for caries disease that are non-invasive.
And so
So
you
the
mean like
products,
remineralization, right?
right? Yeah, right. So there are no remin claims per se, only caries prevention. I'll explain it a bit more. But we got pushed into this sensitivity area, and that's also another major pain point for dentists and their patients, literally and figuratively speaking. So, what's interesting is that the dental sensitivity that most people are accustomed with is the exposure of the dental tubules when you have recession. So, when you wear out your cementum, or at the base of your enamel, you have this stimuli that can really impact the nerve endings through conductors through these tubules. So, what FDA recognized is that if you block those tubules, you have a true treatment for recession dental hypersensitivity. But because we focus all our research on caries through multiple NIH grants through the dental division, we're all focused on the enamel, the early stage caries lesion, and those, if you have a white spot, that can really impact when you're doing whitening. So, kind of by diversion, we got into this whole second area of sensitivity treatment, not only from recession, but also from whitening, where the peroxide molecules travel through the pores in enamel and then really cause this pulpitis that gives you these awful zinging sensations that we've experienced, most of us have experienced.
So what are most people using then in these minimally invasive or non-invasive caries treatments or in dental sensitivity?
Well, of course, one of the very popular products is Sensodyne. It has potassium nitrate in it. That what it basically does, it's like Tylenol for your teeth. It neutralizes the nerve endings, And by doing that, you have a temporary relief. Whereas if you want a true claim for sensitivity treatment, you need to plug those dental tubules. And you need to show, FDA told us this, you have to show that you're not actually plugging it with something other than minerals that are lasting. And so we learned by default that our product works really well in plugging these tubules, and I'll show you some of that data. But also because it plugs the enamel pores, it really reduces the sensitivity during whitening, before and after whitening.
Okay.
So I mentioned that caries is a disease with no FDA-approved non-invasive treatments,
That's crazy.
and
I bet most dentists on this call didn't know that.
yeah. And, when we talked to fluoride, they told us directly fluoride is a minefield for them. And, if you're trying to get a clearance for a device, it's a lot lower hurdle than for a drug. Now, varnishes, for example, which have very high fluoride, 22,600 ppm, they're recognized to really help prevent caries, and they're used offline, but they're cleared for treating sensitivity. So it's just one example. The other products are either drugs or they're non-regulated, or they go through the dentist. So the 5,000 ppm toothpaste are very common. They're RX only. And then there is this thing called the fluoride anti-caries drug monograph. And so that is one way to get your product through and at least be able to talk about caries prevention. Um, Now, what's interesting, what we have learned and observed is that dentists really have a difficulty finding products that actually work. And we realize that's because there is no difference in appearance before and after treatment. So if you have a white spot and you're treating it with fluoride, I'll show you, it's only going to seal the extreme upper surface layer. So the dominant lesion doesn't go away. And that's where we're very different. So the common approach, Kyle, is wait and watch. And if you're a conservative dentist, that's great, but it's a bit of a two-edged sword at the same time, because now you're waiting to treat that lesion, or you could maybe even schedule it for surgery, uh, and hoping that it'll go away. But the patient comes back 6 or 12 months later, whenever they decide to come back, it could have become worse, and now you have to treat it anyways. So there's actually, we think, a huge opportunity for dentists to not send patients home without treatment. And instead of a wait and watch or scheduling for a surgical treatment months down the road, to have like an immediate revenue by providing them preventative remineralization treatment, and then they can be the hero at the next visit. So that's really been our passion, Kyle, to really help dentistry, and I'll explain more how we do it.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I think that's really the interesting thing that I got so interested in is you're using starch. I remember when I first met you
yeah,
and you said, "Yeah, we're using starch." And I'm like, "What? Starch in the teeth? What are you
yeah.
talking about?" Can you give
So
us some of the science behind this? How
yeah,
does it
with,
work?
without nerding out too much here, let me say that my view of toothpaste, for the most part, is that we're rubbing little insoluble rocks on our teeth. And the
Hmm.
benefit of that, of course, is that it does remove the biofilm and cleans as much as possible. But if you look at the solubility of enamel or hydroxyapatite or the other minerals they put in toothpaste, they're incredibly insoluble. So they're not remineralizing teeth. And one product I would be amiss to not mention this, and we welcome them in this space, of course, is a product called Curadon Repair. And this is quite a unique approach. They're the only other product like us that is trying to remineralize the subsurface.
Hmm.
And this is a self-assembling peptide technology, and it is gaining substantial traction in the US. So we're very encouraged by that, Kyle, to see the thinking is changing among dentists, and that's now available. Uh, you know, uh, we see that being adopted to quite a large amount.
Yeah.
It is, of course, rather costly. So when you say starch, let me explain. Uh, this is really what sets us apart. We have low cost starch nanoparticles. And there's somebody coming in here, so let me admit them here. we have low-cost starch nanoparticles, which I commercialized at my previous venture called Ecosynthetics. That's a company I founded right here in Michigan, and now a global corporation that we took public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, which became Canada's largest IPO. So we're just bloody fortunate to be able to pull that off. That company is now selling that all over the world for high volume packaging. And starch, cornstarch, is the number one crop in the United States. So we have cost on our side, and we want this to be available to also the underserved communities. So I had to start a new venture, GreenMark, in 2016, and what is very this is not moving forward. You see, here we go. What's very different is that we're making our own. We learned a lot about these starch particles at Ecosynthetics through multiple university collaborations, but we're making our own tiny particles and we've designed them so that they go exactly where needed. So we learned how to put things into and attach functionalities onto them so they can be targeted. And that's what I call our light bulb idea.
So the
So,
starch is bringing certain materials into the tooth.
yes,
So it's
yeah.
a
So
carrier. The starch is functioning as a carrier.
exactly. So it's the ideal carrying material because we have enzymes in saliva to break it down. So as soon as these particles dissolve in your saliva, they release the ions. So rather than rubbing the insoluble mineral little rocks, as they call them, across our teeth, or using fluoride that only treats the surface, we are actually targeting the subsurface. I'm going to illustrate that with a schematic after this slide. But fundamentally, we have products that contain calcium and phosphate. So the phosphate is actually bonded to the starch and not released until you break down the starch particles, as well as the calcium. And calcium and phosphate find each other immediately. So if it's released in the saliva after it's targeted to the subsurface of the tooth, it forms the hydroxyapatite in situ. And as I mentioned, we also have fluoride-containing products. We launched that fluoride-free product first last year in May with Dentulu as our partner, and then we just got clearance for the fluoride-containing product, and it's like only 1,000 ppm fluoride, so it's much more fluoride efficient in a low dose form. And then we also attached a fluorescent dye. So here the F now is a fluorescent tag. And so we attached this dye, and Nathan did this in his PhD research um, to make these fluorescent particles that illuminate caries lesions well before you see them on X-rays. And this is also how Nathan proved that we can uh, uh, have a very effective targeting mechanism. Again, I'll illustrate that in the next slide. I have a lot more information around the LumiCare product. Today, I'm focusing more on CrystLCare, the treatment, but I'm also happy to share that with you if that's of interest. And probably for the sake of time, we can do that offline. So anyone who wants to connect with me, I'll show you my contact information afterwards. So this is the schematic I'm talking about. So while Nathan was doing his PhD in 2015, uh, he proved that the porous subsurface of early stage caries lesions are negatively charged. And this was a big finding, but in hindsight, also a bit of a duh. Pardon me, Nathan, in the sense that, you know, enamel is hydroxyapatite, so it's calcium phosphate. So when calcium preferentially leaves, it leaves behind these negatively charged phosphate oligomers all over the inside of the early lesion. And, this is one of my passions. I love these examples from nature. Enamel is the hardest surface in our body. And we're talking these 5 micron bundles of hydroxyapatite crystals that are close, stacked together like a Greek temple. And then the bacteria produce organic acids from sugar, and they seep initially in between those little pillars. That creates the porosity. So that's a very complex structure in the subsurface of teeth that you somehow have to treat. And because we have this targeting mechanism, we have, I think, a superior solution. Now, the other thing, Kyle, we recognize is that fluoride is negatively charged. So It's
Well, that's what I was
basically
just thinking when I
out.
was looking here. I'm like, how do you get the fluoride and the phosphate in? If those are both negative, aren't they going to repel each other?
Yes, exactly. So that's what this diagram is trying to illustrate. So all of this whole dominant subsurface lesion is untouched. It's well known that fluoride only reacts at the surface, which is still a good thing. And that means you're arresting that lesion, but it is still prone to uh, its weakness. It's going to potentially cavitate down the road. And when you have further opening, it's a dynamic, as we know, Caries is a dynamic mineralization, demineralization process.
Right.
So that's, because the reason is that fluoride uh, uh, only really seals that extreme upper surface layers because it's negatively charged. So it's not repairing the dominant subsurface. That's where we're very different. So we've put the positive charge on the starch particles that then target and are attracted into the negative subsurface, where they then release the mineral ions to form the hydroxyapatite in situ. And Nathan has proved that as part of GreenMark that is forming hydroxyapatite predominantly.
And so let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, because why would some people use fluoride and some people not use fluoride besides, the political or some of the research that's came out recently? Like, why would one choose fluoride or not if you just want to remineralize the lesion? Does fluoride help remineralize the lesion?
Well, current fluoride, whether it's stannous fluoride or sodium fluoride, per our explanation, will seal the surface. And so what you will see is you turn the kind of rough surface, bumpy white spot into a smooth, shiny lesion, but the white spot is still there.
Uh-huh.
And so that's because there's underlying voids that creating that difference. So initially, you lose the natural fluorescence of the enamel, so you can really see the white spot when it's active. It's dull and bumpy. But then, as a dentist, if you pull the back of your Explorer across it, or hygienist, you really notice that uh, it's rough and bumpy. And then when it's been remineralized at the surface, it becomes shiny and smooth. That's an inactive lesion. So why are people not using it? Well, this started in Grand Rapids decades ago, and we've seen a huge impact, at least 30% impact, also on adults and children. But it doesn't work for everybody. Now, obviously, if you go back and drink a gallon of Mountain Dew the next morning and you don't brush your teeth, it's going to not be very impactful. Some people don't have fluoride in their water, so they're not going to have that if you have well water. And then, it's become a bit of a political issue, which we can talk
Yeah.
about later. The whole mechanism here that really Nathan invented with our whole team together, including cardiologists and biomaterials experts, is this whole idea of targeting the subsurface and then releasing to really give a superior outcome. And we've now proven that. So at the bottom here, you see the JADA Foundational Science publication that just got accepted by JADA in early December, and published. And so we're very excited about that. That's really includes third-party data that proves you're remineralizing the subsurface. And I have a little bit of a couple of graphs that illustrate that if you want to see that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So we have the starch particle that's bringing these other ions into the tooth to remineralize from the inside out.
Exactly.
Is there is there a limit? I know you said once there's cavitation, then we probably want to go to, whatever the dentist he or she thinks is the right thing.
Yeah.
Would there be anything bad that could happen if they tried to remineralize?
We don't think it'll work if it's a true cavity. What you're seeing here is kind of this surface layer. And what we know very well, it's very well established, is that when you have the acid seeping in between these columns from the base and from these columns, the calcium and phosphate desorb, and then they meet fluoride at the surface. So often that bridge, that's the last thing to go, is being replenished, constantly replenished to form, in most cases, fluorapatite, which is more acid resistant than hydroxyapatite. And that is sort of the last thing to go. Once that underlying structure becomes so weak and it's mostly gone, then it, of course, can collapse. You get a hole, you get a cavity. That's when
So,
we're too
so
late.
would I
We
be
need,
correct in saying like you need this
yeah,
somewhat structure or lattice
yeah,
to stay open so that we can bring the particles in and build it from
yeah,
the inside out and it won't
yeah,
cave in on itself.
exactly. So our
Okay.
whole mindset has to change. Whereas the FDA thinks caries starts when you have a cavity, cariologists, experts, they all know that it starts early when you have the first early processes. And what has limited the dental profession is not being able to find it when it's that early. So often in
Right.
X-ray, when we find it, it's time to then go ahead and treat it, meaning surgical intervention.
Yeah.
But if you can find it much earlier, you can treat it non-invasively.
And so tell me how this is applied. How are we
Yeah.
treating our patients like this? What is
So
the mechanism?
So we initially started with a powder in a little tray that we then have a little ampule of water we mix, and it was just work. It was cumbersome, but some of the early research we did, it worked well. We formed a gel within 30 seconds, and then Nathan came up with this idea of the dissolvable strip. And we first thought it would take time, but we just jumped on it, and we just absolutely loved it. So it's really easy to use. So we have this dissolvable dental strip. If you're familiar with the Listerine breath mints,
Yeah.
put those on your tongue. Now we're
Hmm.
asking you to put it on your teeth, and it's predominantly a food grade polysaccharide film. So it's not plastic. It looks like plastic. It folds like plastic. It's strong. But if you're using it for your patients, you use dry gloves, or if you're using it on yourself, use dry hands, and then you moisten or lick your teeth, and it applies directly onto it. You fold it over to the back, and then each strip is the size that is designed for one tooth and the adjacent two teeth. And because of
Okay.
the targeting, particles are embedded in the strip. Because of the targeting, they then find the lesions, whether they're interproximal or any surface on the tooth, occlusal, buccal, etc. So um, the strips are white, but as soon as you stick them on it, they turn wet because of the saliva. They turn completely transparent. So you can just go about your business within seconds. They become invisible. And we have two methods. This is the IFU. If you scan the QR code, that's the IFU instructions for use. There's two methods. One is a tray method, and that's 20 minutes exposure. And the direct method is 3 minutes, and both work very well. We've learned from experience.
And so if someone has one of those white lesions, those little interproximal enamel only things, it's not cavitated yet. How many applications would they have to use before you would say this is remineralized?
I have two answers for you. One is it depends.
It's a good
it,
answer.
it depends on the patient, their oral hygiene, etc. And two is that because of FDA, we have a multi-pronged strategy to start with the product for sensitivity treatment. So those are the claims we as a company can only really hold
Okay.
out to our customers. But the dentist, of course, can take it much further. They can say whatever they like
Yes.
about the product. So, but in any event, we will eventually do a de novo FDA with applicate with sorry, de novo application, which means that you don't have to do a 510K. You don't need a predicate you try to compare to. You can
Yeah.
then brag about how unique you are, and that's the ultimate goal that we're trying to raise a Series A for to really accomplish that. And
Yeah.
we will
And
also
we're
have
gonna talk about that later for
yeah,
anybody that's
yeah,
interested from an investment standpoint. We'll talk about that at the end too.
yeah, yeah, great. But we also are planning to do this fluoride anti-caries drug monograph. Like Curodont, you have to then put fluoride in your product, even though you don't necessarily need it. So in
Mm,
Europe, Curodont has no 1,000 ppm fluoride in the product, but just in the US market, because of the FDA complexities, they put 1,000 ppm so they can talk about caries prevention. and Remin.
Got
They're
it.
taking the liberty of talking about Remin. So we'll follow the same route. We've got a grant we got last year, May. We're in the middle of doing that to get qualified for this anti-caries drug monograph. But now you're a drug, so now the product is not a medical device; it's a drug, and uh, and then you just register with FDA. You don't need to get clearance, but you do need drug GMP manufacturing. So that's what we're investing in.
So I know you have a slide that is the evidence of treatment of early caries. Can you show that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, and let me just explain a bit more maybe about the strips. Uh, First of all, this is just an illustration how it just immediately sticks to your teeth and then turns transparent. After a while, you don't see it. 3 minutes, it's completely dissolved. Um, we've priced it so that dentists can make money, and it's all about getting this out to as many people as possible. So it's reasonably priced at 15.99 for dental clinics. But if it's in between visits, dentists want the product, they can buy it from Dentulu online for 39.99. So the dentist is protected,
Hmm.
but we're not charging astronomical, and that's for 14 doses.
Yeah.
So here is just an example of a person. There's a video. If you scan this QR code at the bottom of the slide or copy the link down, or anybody who wants to copy the slides, I can send you the PDF. But that takes you to a minute and a half video that really illustrates how the product is applied and how it's used. But this is Yoli, who's a dental hygienist who suffered from 13 years of severe sensitivity, and it was literally gone after one application. So super excited. We find that depending on the patient, 1 to several days treatment, which is why we put at least 14 in the package, and um, then it lasts for 3 or 6 months, sometimes even a year. It just really depends on the patient. To come back to your earlier question, for caries, we have a major protocol that's been approved for Texas Health San Antonio. Again, that's what we plan to fund. 45 patients, 100K study with Benamici in at Texas Health that really will focus on what it takes for caries treatment. But right now, the protocol is to do 1 dose per day for 14 days. If you have a white spot, and of course, the earlier you catch it, the better the success rate to removing that or to arrest that and remineralize the subsurface.
Okay.
So, in terms of what you asked about results, keeping this pretty high level, I mean, we have a
And this was
lot of
what was published last month or 2 months ago,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, we have a lot of data in this publication led by Nathan. Um, so I mentioned we first had a powder that you turn into gel. This is the fluoride free. This is the fluoride plus product. 1,000 ppm fluoride in this product, but now it's in the particle, so it's not loose fluoride. And here you see is the amount of remineralization that's going on here is very minimal for fluoride. This is the same level of sodium fluoride as is in here. So that's the percentage of lesion remineralized. And then the water is DI water is a negative control. It's actually a negative result, meaning we're losing enamel. And that's because the well-defined protocol for doing a study like this is 20 doses, 20 days, one per day. Uh, Using acid cycling. So that's really a robust protocol to mimic the metabolic cycles
So this
that
is
are,
20 days, one
yeah,
application a day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in both of those gels, one with fluoride, one without, right? You're getting
yeah.
at least 40% remineralization of the lesion.
Yes. Well, what's interesting here is that then we started turn to this is working here. We turned to the strip, and the result was remarkably better. Probably because it's really just close and you're reconstituting it directly in the mouth. So there's no time between having the dry particles and having them dissolve in the saliva and then being targeted into the lesion and releasing the ions. We can't sort of put these in a liquid because then the calcium and phosphate will be released in the liquid and then they just form hydroxyapatite in the liquid and then we're doing the same that everybody else is doing is we're rubbing little
I mean,
rocks
this
on
is
teeth.
crazy. I wish every dentist could see, to even know that this is possible, that 20 days of non-invasive treatment can remineralize a lesion 75%.
Yeah, and there's another way to look at this data. So we have a lot of data in this paper. I'll just show you one more, but this is, I think, quite informative because now we're comparing the healthy part of the teeth. So this is all data that's statistically significant. We have all the statistics in the publication. Don't want to bore everybody with that, but the blue parts of the bars are the healthy enamel, and then the greens are the level that's being restored. And what you're seeing is this in the left three bars is different the depths of the lesion. So near the surface, in the middle of the lesion, and the base of the lesion. And what's quite interesting is that we're seeing a significant amount of restoration of mineral within the subsurface of the treated lesions. And these are, Nathan, I think these are like 50 plus teeth or something, right? Average. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Um, so we're talking on, if you just look at the overall result, we're increasing it from 86 to 96% mineral, which is not insignificant because, of course, teeth are not 100% mineral. They have 3% protein at least. Um, so this is admittedly all on extracted teeth, which is a really good model for studying this. That's why we could do this technique called micro CT.
Right.
If you're not
Because you're not
familiar
going to
with
take
that,
out people's
yeah,
human teeth and
it's a problem.
section them a bunch of different
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, yeah. So we're really excited about these results, and that's why we want to move forward with the clinical study as soon as possible, as soon as we get the funding. But we're confident this is working. The other thing, as I mentioned, we got into the dental sensitivity with the idea that we could have a superior product by not just depositing on the surface of dentin, where you see these tubules, but we actually can occlude into the tubules. And noteworthy is that in whitening, anywhere from 50 to 90% of patients suffer this pain sensations, these zinging sensations. So this is the electron microscopy images, and it shows that we have a substantial deposit of crystals on the surface of the dentin. We use a dentin disc here, and when you cross section that, you see these tubules and you see the particles that are lodged, they're completely blocking this, or even whole sections that are occluded. And then we always compare things against negative and positive control. So now you're seeing in the positive control, we didn't see much deposit or occlusion here. We saw some, of course, but not as much as ours. And then here, you see the negative control DI water. The tubules are completely open, and if you cross section it, you see these tubules here, they're not blocked. So even better way to do that is to do a test. And I don't want people to fall asleep here, but it's called hydraulic conductance. So actually a very simple test. This is done by a third party, Intertech in the UK. They're very well set up to do this. They take dentin discs and they pump water through it and they measure the flow rate. And when you block those tubules, the flow rate reduces,
Right.
obviously. So this is a measure after one single dose of CrystLCare or any of these products treatment. We're talking uh, after 1 week and 2 weeks. So if you go to the Fluoride Plus product, which has the same amount of fluoride in it as the predicate device, we have what we needed to get FDA clearance, which is substantial equivalence against the positive control here. The negative control you see doesn't block much. You always have some from the saliva. So this was exposed to saliva for 1 and 2 weeks. Um, but what really amazed us and thrilled us was how well the fluoride-free product is performing. And after all, enamel is hydroxyapatite, right? Calcium phosphate. Um, so we're really encouraged by it. And that's why we launched the fluoride-free product first. It's a class one medical device and registered with the FDA. And then the class two just got clearance in January this year.
So I know a question that probably people are thinking, because I know we have a lot of people from the US. How do we get w- how does insurance look at this?
Yeah. Let me jump maybe past this slide. This is how where you can obtain this. Is maybe just quickly maybe mention, Kyle, if you don't mind. Uh, One of the things I learned in my last venture is that if you marry one dental company, they all want their branding, their exclusivity. And what we did well with Ecosynthetics is we partnered with Cargill and they had no special rights. And that's why we were able to take the company public. So I've done a repeat of this by co-branding. And so thanks to Dr. Arash, who was really welcoming us in this space, they were the first to sign up on this sort of non-exclusive distributorship. And they even introduced us to Paul O'Malley, who leads Great Oral Health. So
Hmm.
each of these companies have done the 100,000 dose order. Let me jump to the reimbursement and then I'll come back to the sort of the
Yeah, and then we can talk more
projections.
about the business side of this.
Yeah, let me see where the reimbursement is. We can go to the slide here.
Because I know there's some other products on the market that I think you've already talked about that I know people that have used too, and they're either getting reimbursement or it's so affordable and it's makes such a difference in patients' lives that they're happy to pay for it out of pocket.
So in terms of reimbursement, there are very well established reimbursement codes have been around for a long time for sensitivity treatment. And so you have D9910 that is typically anywhere from 60 to $110, depending on where you are in the US. And 9911 is specifically for root caries. Then there's newer codes. 1354, which is used a lot for SDF, sulfadiamine fluoride. 1355 carries preventative medicament. But what's exciting about these codes is these are per tooth, which is kind of why we
Mm.
developed the strip the way we did. So dentists can get the maximum benefit and reimbursement from that. Then the new thing is that last year, January, there's this new code that was approved is called D2991 for hydroxyapatite regeneration. And RDH magazine actually mentioned GreenMark because
Yeah, it says your
88,
name when they're talking
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So this was really led by one of our other advisors, Jeremy Horst Keeper, very interesting guy who used to be at CareQuest, now started a number of clinics that he got funded in San Francisco where he's only focusing on preventative treatment. So we really think that's the future. He helped get this quote working with Viva Artists for Curadon, but they mentioned CrystLCare and GreenMark because the ADA doesn't like to give a code for just one company.
Yeah.
They want it
And
to
I
be for
believe
more
most
category.
dentists that are doing this, it doesn't have to be applied by the dentist, correct?
No, it could be a hygienist.
Or even the
Yeah, no
patient
problem.
themselves, right?
Yeah. And so this, as everybody probably knows, if you're a dentist in the U.S., having a code is one thing. Getting reimbursed is a whole other process. Can of
Yeah.
worms. Fortunately, 40% is out of pocket, at least in the U.S.
Yeah.
But this code is now being honored in a number of states, and it's going to keep improving. We hope anywhere from 55 to 125 per tooth. And we also know that a lot of people are paying out of pocket $150. And
Yeah.
we learned from a large DSO in the US that they've done 200,000 applications of Curadont under this code in 1 year period. So that's showing there's a substantial growing market.
Well,
So,
it's a fantastic product. You know, if you can bring a product to somebody that's minimally invasive, fairly easy, and from a dentist standpoint can be delegated, you know, it can be done in a hygiene room or it can be done when you're treating another patient. That's production that usually we can't think about. And to do
yeah,
something that's so minimally invasive, I think patients, if they don't already, they need to understand that being more minimally invasive should actually cost more, right? Because we're saving the tooth. It's
yeah.
almost like something like this should be more, should cost more, you know, I think, than even more like
Yeah.
a crown, right? Because like we're going to save
Well,
your tooth.
I can help there because my past experience is everybody always wants more for less.
Yeah.
Also, if when we introduced biodegradable plastics or we introduced bio-based binders, we saved paper mills $1 million a year, and that's why it took off. And then they talked about the environment. So it's just similar to dentistry. I think everybody wants to make money. So we're positioning people to do that. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Well, it's
the,
nice to do it in an ethical way. It's nice
yeah,
to make
yeah,
money by being more minimally invasive, by giving
absolutely.
patients what they want. I
Yeah.
think if you asked any patient, would you rather me wait until this becomes a hole and then we do a filling where I have to get you numb, or would you rather do this thing we kind of just stick it on your tooth? You don't have to get numb for it, and it's $150 or something like
Yeah.
this. I think every patient is going to choose the latter.
And to be honest, we don't tell dentists what to charge. They can charge
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
they
yeah.
want. But
Hmm.
my view is that if you charge $150 for tooth for somebody who can afford it, all the power to you. However, we are creating the room for the dentist to make the same amount of money and actually apply it for a lot less and be fully covered by insurance if that's available, or to make it much more affordable because you got
Hmm.
14 doses in a package, right?
Right.
And so if we're talking about value crop, really, our products are really set up to increase clinic revenue with a
Yeah.
minimum 100% markup within existing reimbursement codes uh, for if that's your passion. But what is interesting, a whole different dynamic is that we learned from looking at ADA data that in any one year, 100 to 200 million Americans did not see the dentist. Blows your mind, right? And I came to realize that that's actually where there's a huge opportunity because each patient brings on average $750 a year to the clinic. So if you drive even a fraction of just the lower level 100 million Americans see the dentist to go see the dentist for this, that's a multi-billion-dollar growth opportunity for dentistry at large.
Yeah, and a
So
huge reason why people aren't coming to the dentist is because of fear of pain, fear of
yeah,
injections, fear of being drilled. And those are all their words. I guess they wouldn't say injection, they would say shot.
yeah. And
Okay,
to
so
be
I think
honest,
we've
can
talked a
I?
lot about the product.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the business a little more, because I know you
yeah,
guys you've already raised what, $5 million previously, right? And you're going to be raising some more money in a Series A. I'd love for you to explain that for any of the
sure.
dentists that are on here that are qualified investors that may be interested in the investment opportunity.
Great. I'd
And for
like
those
to.
watching, this isn't a requirement, of course. Like
Yeah,
you can just you can just buy the strips.
I'd like to add one quick thing here, if I may, Kyle, is that when we tell this story about 102 million dentists, dentists on the receiving end say, well, okay, what do I do with that, right? So practically speaking, the low-hanging fruit is this whole issue of fluoride exposure in drinking water. And we all are aware because of this district judge Chen's ruling that although it was at double the recommended water level of zero point 0.7 ppm, uh, they're seeing an IQ loss in young children. And so it's not a double randomized controlled blinded clinical trial that's statistically significant, but we have to be overly cautious when it comes to children. So it is a low hanging fruit opportunity. And what we've projected, just to make it more meaningful for dentists, is that they can make, even at 30% of their patients, over $100,000 in additional revenue from using our product, just making 24 bucks a package, even without reimbursement. So it's really what I've learned from my experience. It's all about the numbers. And if you can make this available to as many patients as possible, now also the underserved lower socioeconomic classes can benefit from that, and it's going to make your clinic thrive, and people are excited about it. So,
Yeah.
so these are some of the dentist quotes that we're getting. Patients are really receptive. They're even using it in some cases. This Meredith Smedley is using it in place of varnish for children. So they can't keep it on the shelf. So that's really exciting. Um, we can skip the achievements here if you want in the interest of time, but
Yeah,
we're
let's
really,
maybe, I want to make sure we're cognizant of
yeah,
everybody's time. We've talked a lot about the science and everything. I
yeah.
want to get to a little bit of the business aspect of it. So if you could
So
just
let
go
me get
to
to,
and explain what you're raising right now. What is the opportunity to invest if someone's interested in investing? At what valuation?
let me see, I think it's here. No, one back. So, yeah, as you said, we've raised 5 million in equity investment, and also on top of that, 3.4 million from NIH grants. So all through the dental NIDCR. We have several other grants that we've submitted the past year, and in fact, in December, got a notice of intent to fund. But with the change of government, that's been frozen and unfrozen, and we're waiting to hear on that. But the beauty of those grants is that for this one that's we got the notice to intention to fund, it's 300K for 6 months on a key aspect of what we need to get done anyways, and then with the promise of a phase two, which is 2.5 million. So we've been really trying to use these grants as much as possible to build value and to stretch our ability to do research and continued product development. We see that going on into the future. Currently, we're raising uh, a 4 million Series A, minimum 2.5 million, but we really like to. The sweet spot is 4 million. Um, and in December, the GreenMark directors and shareholders officially approved a SAFE instrument. Thanks to
Okay.
Arash, he said, dentists don't like this complicated paperwork like we have multi pages. This is a very simple, safe document that a lot of dentists are familiar with. We're trying to entice the first investors who will get a 25% lift on their investment up to 500,000. So that's officially approved by the shareholders. And then the minimum is 10,000 per investor.
Okay.
And then the saves will convert at the A, which is anticipated by Q2 of this year.
Yeah, so
And get
for those of you that are on here that maybe haven't done previous investing, basically what this is that you invest at this valuation now, and then whatever the Series A is when this converts, right? And like Steven said, the Series A will be, think, when do you think?
Q2 is the
Within
target. And then
within 2 years, is that what you said?
no, Q2 meaning
Oh,
the next
Q2.
quarter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So we're trying to get the saves done this January, February, March period, Q1. And then
Hmm.
in the next 3 months, we want to lock up the Series A. Sometimes it can take a bit longer with all the papering that goes on, but that's the
Yeah.
goal. And then because of my prior venture, Ecosynthetics, that's still Canada's largest IPO in the clean tech space, I've been pursued aggressively by TSX Ventures out of Chicago. And what's interesting is TSX Ventures tries to overtake the space between going public and early investors. So it's a quick way at a order of magnitude lower cost to raise 10 million in 6 months time. So what we have said as a discipline, once we finish our A, we will look at 3 successive quarters of sales growth, whereupon we will then go public on TSX Ventures, look to raise about 10 million that then allows us to take it from the US market to Canada, Europe, South America, and Asia. All of our patents covered those areas, as I've done with my last company. And the beauty for investors now is that they get a 25% lift on the saves that then converts at the A, and they have actually a real opportunity for an early exit opportunity that already would happen towards
It'd
the
be,
end of this
and you're
year.
saying the early exit that they could have would be when it goes on TSX Ventures, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, because
and
here's the thing. So let me just explain this a little bit to
yeah,
those that
please.
are on here that just may say, I'm a dentist. I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, because that used to be me. Um, for example, like when you think about my company, Pearl, our recent valuation was $400 million, but we are a privately held company. So unless it's board approved for someone like me or let's say another investor to sell shares, more than likely there's no equity event where I could sell shares until it goes public. Now, once it goes public, or if there was an acquisition, then I would be able to sell shares. So the fact that Stephen is going to bring this to TSX Ventures allows for investors to be able to have that be liquid instead of just having
Yeah.
the value be in the shares.
I've lived this, Kyle, because I founded the previous company, and if you have options, for example, rather than shares, now the options convert, maybe at the time when you go have an exit event like an acquisition or you go public, but now you have to hold your shares for a year. And you have
Right.
no idea you're in this window. You have to hold it to get long-term capital gains tax treatment, but you don't
Yeah,
know if it's going to tumble in that 1 year or
that's
go
so
up.
true.
If it goes
Yes.
up, you're fine, right? But if it goes down, your shares might all be underwater. So
Yeah.
the beauty of investing now is that you will be guaranteed long-term capital gains tax treatment because the clock will start ticking now. And then if it's a year
Mhm.
later, that would go on TSX Ventures. Now
And I'll tell
your
you that makes
shares
a
can
huge
go.
difference. I know for me with my Pearl shares, that is a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Um, how is the funding going to be used for those that are potentially
Yes.
interested in investing?
Thank you.
Where's the funding going?
Thank you for that question. So these are directional indications, but these are our main activities. So because we'll still invest in sales and marketing a lot, but we have these wonderful partners that are doing a big part of that. So Dentulu has been amazing to work with. They've worked their whole team set behind us to really market the product. So we really appreciate that. Same with the Great Oral Health. So 10% would go to sales and marketing. Um, about 500,000 at least you need for to go public on TSX Ventures, which
Hmm.
again is a lot less than going out on any other exchange.
Right.
And then we have already scaled up to substantial quantities, 100,000 doses. The beauty of this is not like my last company. A lot of this is in small reactors. For a 100-gallon reactor, which is peanuts to my past, we can make millions of doses of this product. So the cost of scaling up is not a lot. We just need to go through those steps and do all the quality management. So that's part of the story. And then clinical studies, key piece. We want to keep building. Our whole process has been get grants, publish the results in high impact peer reviewed journals, uh, do the in vitro studies, then do the clinical studies, and keep building on those clinical studies. Initially, you have to pay for them. We've also
Hmm.
applied for grants, which are really not that many within NIDCR,
Yeah.
but once you get really popular, people will want to do all these clinical studies that we can do a proper double randomized control clinical trial study on, but also do more anecdotal, smaller studies.
Well, as a
And
scientist myself and as
yeah,
a researcher, I love that you guys still want to continue publishing and still want to prove what we already know, but in different ways and, going to more in-depth trials. Because I know I've worked with a lot of companies, and there's some companies that are just like, yeah, let's just sell it. What do you mean? Like, yeah, let's just sell it. And I'm a dentist, I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist. I love the fact that that is still a high priority for you. And I respect companies that do that. So bravo for that. So let's summarize
yeah.
what we've talked about tonight. Uh,
Uh, so maybe there's sort of three takeaways.
okay.
So we have really technology and products for targeted delivery of minerals that form, we've proven this, they form hydroxyapatite crystals and fluorapatite crystals, depending on whether it's got fluoride in it or not. We're not just building a scaffold, but we're actually supplying those minerals. And it's all targeted to the subsurface, so it goes inside dentin and enamel. Thanks to Arash, we've discovered all these other applications on sensitivity treatment even before crowns or temporary crowns are placed, etc., veneers. So we're really mineralizing teeth that reduces sensitivity. And we believe it represents the latest in preventative dental technology using really this concept of guided bioresorbable particles from nature to then, with the goal to improve oral health outcomes and provide also a more positive experience for everyone, the dentist and the patients.
It's great. And then if people want to order, how can they order
Yeah.
through Dentulu or
So, yeah, if you're based in the US, anywhere here, you can order. We're only in the US market now available, but the goal to go all over the world. You can use the QR code here at the bottom of the slide. You can use the promo code to get free shipping right now until the end of February. This promotion we have going on. And my contact information is here. Uh, so please reach out if you want to learn more. Send me emails or always happy to organize a another Zoom session with you or do a training because we're looking for champions as well as investors. So to the extent that we can get more and more dental uh, clinics to adopt this, that's huge for us. And we're always happy to do a web appropriate sort of more clinic focused webinar, even for each individual clinic. So we love doing that. So,
and I'd love to open it up too for questions and also I don't know if Arash is on or not.
yeah, he's here. He's
I'd love
here.
to get his thoughts on
Rush,
some of this
you're
too.
you're on
Yeah, I
mute.
got
There
so
you
much praise. I probably have to say something. Thank you for all the incredible praise, but I think you guys have done an excellent job. Look, the basic idea, the way I look at it is that um, you know, it's clear that this delivery mechanism can take these minerals that are being lost deep into the dentinal tubules, which is exactly what we want to do. It's true mineralization, not from the outside in, from the inside out. So I look at these like little spaceships that are carrying the calcium, the fluoride, the phosphate, these little minerals deep inside the teeth, and literally building the tooth structure back up. And I think it's exciting. I think it has lots of applications. Um, Toothpaste, strips, varnish. There's just so many different ways to get this, both on the professional side and the consumer side. So I think it's exciting. I think the movement towards on the consumer side and wherever you stand with fluoride, whether you like fluoride, you don't like fluoride, but I think this is actually a really good, efficient alternative to fluoride, and it can include fluoride as well. So I think dentists should be excited about this. I know dentists that are using this pre and post whitening. Like the sensitivity is pretty much gone. I know that before you put on those inlays, those crowns, those bridges. You leave that on the dentinal tooth structure, and you get that dentinal sealing that you want. Even during the temporary phase, where some people don't have necessarily the best margins, you put on that temporary, and it's unlike the final. Maybe you have some open margins somewhere. I think that this will really help the patients decrease the sensitivity. So I think there's a lot of cool applications, and really kudos to you, Stephen, Nathan, for your incredible job on this. And I think it's not only an amazing opportunity to incorporate some of this technology into your practice, but also amazing opportunity to potentially invest in the future of anti-cavity, anti-sensitivity technology. So yeah, thank you, Kyle, for
Yeah.
putting this on. And
Yeah, and
anyone that
Arash and I've known Arash for close to 20 years now. I went to dental school together. He was an early investor in one of my companies. We worked together in a lot of different companies from the advisement side. He and I are both really interested in this idea of minimally invasive dentistry. How can we elevate dentistry to be better, dentists to make more money, patients to get treated better,
yeah,
people to have better experiences. So, Arash, I'm always excited to work with you on all of our many projects that we have. So nice for
thank
you to
you.
be here. And
yeah.
any questions? I know there's been a lot. We've talked a lot about science. We've talked about investment. any type of questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer them here, or you can even come off your mic and just answer the or ask the question too.
Okay, I've got a question for you.
Adam, yeah,
Hi,
Obviously,
Adam.
oh, hello. How you doing, Stephen?
Great.
Uh, and I'm thinking about this question with I work with a lot of community providers who use SDF, and there's some great indications for that, and it's done some wonderful things. And the biggest complaint that I get is as far as staining. I mean, is this a product that you see where your SDF doctors are still using it on the molars and then using this product in the anterior locations? I mean, have you thought about it with the relationship with SDF?
Yeah, for sure. Even Jerry Mahorst was involved with the introduction of SDF, and so we're very familiar with that whole development. Um, there's been a huge study conducted on children by Margarita Fontana at the University of Michigan that really showed a positive impact on children. Um, Initially, the intent of SDF, it's a strong oxidizer, so it's silver, so it turns black once it oxidizes. The initial driver was on cavitated lesions to really have a way to arrest them, also for people who can't afford filling. The fundamental conclusion from that big study was that filling is always still more beneficial than putting SDF. But if you can't afford that, then that's a great way to go. SDF has moved forward from there, especially on interproximal, as you said, to really use it on where you can't see the blackness, or even under uh, when you put glass ionomer and things like that. So I think there's room for all these products. What's very different is the SDF sort of immediately hardens that surface and kills the bacteria by oxidizing. What we're doing is we're trying to find it much earlier and treat it much earlier. So you really have beautiful, shiny surfaces. And in the ideal case, see the white spot reduce in size and even vanish. And so, but fundamentally, I think the more of these products are available, the more choices we provide dentists, the better it is.
Yeah, cool.
yeah. I think you're right on that. I think you're gonna have people. It's kind of like what Arash was saying. You'll have some people that will want to use fluoride. You have some people that won't want to use fluoride. You have some people that may want to use a peptide. You have some people that want to use starch. You have some people want to use SDF. Everybody will fall into their own little camps. And also, too, I mean, you may have one patient that may need all three applications, depending on how big they are, how aesthetic they are, if there's sensitivity, right? And I think this just gives us one more quiver or maybe two more quivers in our uh, in whatever you hold a quiver in your in your backpack, I guess.
Arrows.
Yeah, your toolbox
Yeah,
to
yeah.
treat our patients
Um,
more minimally invasive.
I saw a question from, I think, Carly about can we cut the strips? Yes, you can do anything you want, of course. We designed it because it's a medical device as a single-use packaging. So rather than the uh, uh, Listerine strips, which are all a bunch of strips in one package. This is single use packaging. You don't need to cut them because they're not very expensive. And it's better if you have one specific tooth in mind to overlay it on that tooth and the two adjacent teeth. So now you're basically able to get the particles to go into the interproximal areas between the teeth and everything. So yes, you can cut it, but it's not needed, and it completely dissolves. So if you're putting a temporary crown on, for example, place it after you've prepped the dent and exposed. You've prepped the tooth. You've got the naked dent. Place a strip on top, moisten it, and let it dissolve in 3 minutes, and then you can place the temporary crown right over top because it's gone.
Yeah, I think this would be a nice choice for those, especially those anterior white spot lesions. And maybe, Adam, this is kind of what you were talking about, is when you have those people that have those just little white spot lesions like on their centrals, very
Yeah,
easy to apply this, especially I think because the teeth are more flat. It may make application even easier if it's on a flat
yeah,
surface. Um, I think that could be a really nice use case because you see so many people like doing veneers because of that or doing
Yeah,
fillings or something. And I'm like, let's just fix the actual lesion, right? Let's just,
yeah,
Stephen, I don't know if I've asked you this before. Are you familiar with molar and incisor hypoplasia? Yeah, so I
yeah,
see Nathan is. So my son has molar incisal hypoplasia.
yeah,
I actually
yeah.
didn't know what it was until
Yeah.
my son had it. I was talking with his orthodontist, who's ortho perio double specialist, and she gave me a paper on it, and it was something like 10 to 15% of children have this molar incisor hypoplasia. And I think this would be such a great use case for this. I don't know if it would work for this. If it does, because so many of these kids are having, crowns done or veneers done or fillings done. Nathan, are you familiar if this would help with this?
Yeah, it's a use case that we're I think is really exciting for the use of these particles. We haven't done as the clinical work on it,
Okay.
and these cases are really more it they have a lot of sensitivity, pain associated with it, but it's also a lot of porosity in the tooth, and so
Yeah.
I think our technology is designed for this case. It helps with sensitivity. It fills those porosities. So I I believe that it would do a great job there. We uh, and we'd love to do clinical testing
Yeah,
on
that'd
that
be a
to really
great
prove.
study because what I realized, or what I didn't realize, was just how prevalent it is. And it's like one of those things that once you see it all over the place. And I started seeing that now on people that I'm talking to and on
Yeah, yeah,
patients
yeah.
but it took my own kid having it to really get it in my head.
I think the operating principle is that if it's an active lesion and the pores are open, you can treat it. Our particles need to be able to get in.
Right.
And of course, there's a way to open it up. A lot of people are doing that with MI paste. They're doing an acid treatment like with phosphoric acid.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, all you're doing there is you're rubbing insoluble uh, particles on enamel and then masking the refractive index different. So it could still give you better aesthetics. But
Hmm.
um, if the lesion is arrested or if it's hypomineralization, for example, you won't have that charge attraction. So the advantage of it for the detection, we can truly differentiate between active and inactive lesions.
Mm.
So are they progressing or are they arrested? If they're arrested, maybe you can leave them alone for now. Um, and 40% of our estimates are 40% of white spots are inactive lesions. And then you have the ability also to differentiate with fluorosis, which are basically birth defects, right? So,
Right.
or, overfluoridation, hypomineralization, all those things. So yeah, so I think you could always use that kind of either hypochlorite or phosphoric acid pre-treatment if you wanted to open things up and really repair them with
Nice.
our part.
Stephen, can you put up just your contact information one more time if
Yeah,
anybody's interested?
yeah.
And, anybody can too. You can reach out to me on Instagram. It's just Dr. Kyle Stanley. If you have any questions, I can put you in touch as well. But I hope that this has been useful for everybody. I mean, even I learned a lot, and I've been working with GreenMark for quite some time now. So
So let me share this and let me
Christine
just.
said this is a game changer. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thanks for having us. Fantastic.
So Kyle, here's my contact information and a couple of things I'd love to be able to add. One is that we didn't get a chance to talk about the team. It is all about the people I've learned in any kind of company. So we have a wonderful team, and we'll continue to grow that. I'd be remiss, of course, you've met Nathan already. He's a key member of our team. It's been super passionate, wonderful to work with. My wife is also part of the team. She's our VP of Clinical Affairs and for a thought partner for Nathan and I. And we have, a lot of advisors. We have quality manager. A lot of people that are incentivized with shares to reduce our burn and to be very effective. So we're very conscious of how we spend our funds. But we have a big goal in mind to, as my wife says, help heal the world's teeth and make it a more positive experience. Because uh, we all know how prevalent this disease is all over the world, and it's impacting people. If you lose teeth, you can't smile, you can't get a job, and so dentists are doing a phenomenal job, and we just want to empower them to do an even better job and make the visits, the checkups, a more positive experience for everyone.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
last
Well,
but not
yeah,
least, thank you, Kyle, for doing this and setting this up. And anyone who wants to reach out, please contact.
fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to have been able to do this. I think we should do this again. And yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good night. Hope you enjoyed this.